Day 53. Nancy Guthrie has not been found, and 3 days ago, her family quietly dropped a date into a public statement that the FBI has been circling for weeks. The date is January 11, not February 1, the night she disappeared. January 11, 3 weeks earlier, a Sunday evening. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos told local station KOLD this week that investigators do believe something occurred that night. He was careful with the language, not confirmed, not definitive, but significant enough that the FBI has been going door to door, asking residents within 2 miles of Nancy's home to review their camera footage from January 1 through February 2 and to pay particular attention to the evening of January 11. That is not a routine canvass. That is investigators signaling, without stating it directly, that they believe someone was in that neighborhood on January 11 with a purpose. And that purpose, they believe, connects to what happened 3 weeks later. This video is not asking who took Nancy Guthrie. That answer sits inside a sealed federal investigation. No one outside it has confirmed a name. This video is asking something narrower, and in some ways harder to sit with. If the person who abducted Nancy was observing her before February 1, what did he learn? What routine did he map? And in the 7 days before she was taken, did something change in how she moved through her week? Something small enough that the people who loved her never registered it. Something that someone watching from the outside recognized as a window. Because what the confirmed evidence describes is not a crime of opportunity. Sheriff Nanos has said it publicly, more than once. He believes Nancy was targeted. Targeted means chosen. It means someone gathered information before acting. And gathering information about an 84-year-old woman living alone in a gated Tucson neighborhood takes proximity. It takes patience. It takes time. Nancy has been missing for 53 days. She requires daily medication to stay alive. More than 40,000 tips have reached law enforcement. The FBI has processed over 10,000 hours of surveillance footage from across the Tucson area. A combined reward of $1.2 million is waiting for anyone with information that leads to her location. No arrest has been made. No suspect has been publicly named. No official has confirmed proof of life. If you are in the Tucson area and you have any footage from January 11 or January 24, please hold on to it. The FBI tip line is pinned in the description. We will come back to why those specific dates and the pattern they form alongside the night of the disappearance itself have not received the attention they deserve. Before we get into what that pattern reveals, 60 seconds to bring you up to speed. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She lives alone in the Catalina foothills, a residential area northeast of Tucson, Arizona. She has a pacemaker connected to an app on her phone. She takes daily medication, a detail investigators flagged early as a serious concern for her survival. By every account from law enforcement and the people who know her, she is mentally sharp. Her disappearance was not voluntary. On the afternoon of January 31, Nancy took an Uber to her daughter Annie's home for a family dinner. Her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, drove her back that evening. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed the official timeline. Her garage door opened at 9:48 p.m. and closed 2 minutes later at 9:50 p.m. She was inside her home. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1, the Nest doorbell camera at her front door disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., a motion sensor at the property activated. At 2:28 a.m., the app linked to her pacemaker lost its connection to her phone. That 1-minute window from the camera going dark to the pacemaker signal dropping is where investigators believe Nancy was taken. By late morning, she had not appeared for her scheduled Sunday church live stream. A member of her congregation alerted the family. Relatives arrived around 11:56 a.m. Her phone was still inside the home. Her personal belongings were still inside. Her blood was on the front porch. The family called 911 at 12:03 p.m. On February 10, the FBI released doorbell camera footage showing a masked individual at Nancy's front door described as male, approximately 5 feet, 9 to 5 feet 10. Average build, wearing a black 2.5 liter Ozark Trail backpack and what appeared to be a holstered firearm. That individual has not been publicly identified. Multiple ransom notes were sent to media outlets demanding cryptocurrency payments, but the FBI has not confirmed the authenticity of any of them. No proof of life has been received by the family through any verified channel. The entire Guthrie family, all siblings and their spouses, has been formally cleared as suspects by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. That is what every major outlet has already reported. Here is what most of them have not yet connected. The FBI did not begin focusing on January 11 because of a tip from the public. They got there through digital forensics. Through the kind of work that happens on equipment, most people never think about the metadata embedded in smart home devices, the timestamps that survive even after a camera goes dark. Sheriff Nanos said it plainly to KOLD. The focus on that date came from the FBI's analysis of the equipment and digital evidence recovered from the property. He was careful to call it speculative, but speculative in law enforcement language does not mean guessed. It means not yet confirmed to the standard required for a court. So what is it that investigators believe happened on January 11? There is an image, a masked figure, reportedly outside Nancy's home, on an evening 3 weeks before she disappeared. The exact timestamp of that image has not been officially confirmed. Google, which manufactures the Nest doorbell camera, has not publicly verified the date. The sheriff's own department acknowledged there is no confirmed date or timestamp associated with certain images. But Nanos also said, on the record, that they do believe something occurred that night. Those two statements are not a contradiction. They are a map of how carefully investigators are moving. What adds weight to January 11 is not the image alone. It is the pattern that image is part of. Look at the dates investigators have asked the public to review. January 11, January 24, January 31 into February 1. Write them in a column, and one fact becomes impossible to dismiss. Every single one of those dates falls on a weekend. January 11 is a Sunday. January 24 is a Saturday. January 31 is a Saturday, flowing into the early hours of Sunday, February 1, when the camera went dark. 3 incidents, 3 weekends, not one weekday. Brian Fitzgibbons, Director of Operations at USPA Nationwide Security, analyzed this pattern on the March 21 episode of Crime Stories. His assessment was direct. He said that all 3 dates falling on weekend nights is, in his words, extremely probative. That the consistency of weekend timing adds significant color to the profile of whoever is responsible. And then he asked the question that the pattern makes unavoidable. Is this someone who traveled a distance, who was working somewhere Monday through Friday during the week and traveling to Tucson on weekends to conduct reconnaissance? Todd Shipley, a digital cybercrime expert and former detective, agreed on the same episode. He said the pattern narrows the identity of the suspect in a meaningful way, that people can now think back to those specific dates and ask where certain individuals were on those nights. That is not speculation being dressed up as analysis. That is a retired law enforcement professional describing how behavioral patterns function as investigative tools. The person who allegedly came to Nancy's neighborhood on 3 consecutive weekends had to have a reason for the timing. Weekends are not random. If your schedule drives your movements, then your schedule is evidence. Now consider what that means for what they were observing. Nancy Guthrie had a life with a visible structure. She attended a Sunday morning church service by live stream, reliably enough that her absence triggered an immediate alert to her family. She had regular family dinners. She used Uber to travel when she needed to, which means her movements were logged in a system. Her home was in a residential neighborhood with a gated entrance. On the afternoon of January 31, she took that Uber to Annie's house for dinner, a trip that was captured on in-car video and later obtained by federal investigators. The footage was reviewed. Nothing unusual about her demeanor. Nothing unusual about what she said. A normal evening with family before being driven home. For someone watching that neighborhood on weekend evenings, the pattern of her comings and goings would become visible over time. What time the garage opens. What time it closes. When the lights inside change. When no car stays in the driveway overnight, when she is alone. 3 weekends of observation would answer most of those questions. According to a neighbor who lives a few houses from the Guthrie property, his dogs woke him at unusual hours on both January 11 and the early morning of February 1. He told Crime Stories with Nancy Grace that the behavior stood out because it was atypical. His dogs did not normally wake him at that hour, and it has not happened since. When he later reviewed footage, one of the dogs appeared to briefly focus on something in the distance before moving on. That account comes from a single source and has not been independently verified. But it places unexplained activity in the neighborhood on both dates that investigators are now examining. What it suggests, and this is not a conclusion, it is a question the evidence raises, is that January 11 was not the beginning of whatever happened to Nancy Guthrie. It may have been a step in a sequence that was already underway. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has said publicly that the family's statement pointing to January 11 suggests the masked individual seen in the doorbell footage conducted what she described as a trial run before the abduction. Her words were precise. She called it a risky move. She noted that if the suspect had been seen or confronted on January 11, Nancy might never have been taken. She added that his willingness to return after already appearing at the property once reflects a level of commitment and calculated risk that is not consistent with an impulsive crime. Here is what makes that analysis land differently when you place it beside the confirmed evidence. The FBI has stated that the images of the suspect carrying the backpack are from the morning of the disappearance, February 1. Investigators later determined that at least one image released by FBI Director Kash Patel, showing the same figure without the backpack, may have been captured on a different day entirely. Sources familiar with the investigation told ABC News that this image was from a date prior to February 1. One theory investigators explored is that the suspect approached the door on an earlier occasion, noticed the camera, and withdrew only to return on the night of the abduction with the camera already identified and the approach already planned. If that is accurate, the doorbell camera did not catch the first visit. It caught a later one, from someone who had already been there. And here is the layer that sits beneath all of it. Sheriff Nanos told KOLD that investigators are focused on January 11 for a reason that is separate from the security footage already released. Not the images, something else. Something recovered through the FBI's analysis of equipment and digital material that has not been made public. Whatever that reason is, it has not been disclosed. The investigation is protecting it. And that single fact, that there is a confirmed reason for the January 11 focus that the public has not been told, is the part of this case that most coverage has mentioned once and moved past. We are not moving past it, because if there is a second reason independent of the footage that places significance on January 11, then that date is not a theory about when the suspect first appeared. It is a confirmed moment in a timeline that investigators are building backward from the night Nancy disappeared towards something that happened weeks before. If you live near Catalina foothills and you have surveillance footage from the evening of January 11 or the afternoon of January 24, the FBI is asking for it. The tip line is in the description, because what that footage might show is not a crime in progress. It is the preparation for one. And preparation, unlike the abduction itself, may have left traces that are still recoverable. The confirmed facts point to a person who did not act impulsively. They point to someone who made choices about timing, about access, about how to approach a home with a camera at the door. Those choices leave a record. The FBI has been working through that record for 53 days. And investigators have said, on the record, that they believe they are closer than they were. What they have not said is what they found on January 11 that they are not yet ready to name. There is one detail about Nancy's front gate that almost every outlet has mentioned once and never returned to. The security gate at the entrance to her property is described by investigators who examined it as nearly impossible to breach from the outside. NewsNation reported that some law enforcement officials, upon reviewing the physical evidence, began to consider whether a second person was already inside the home when the masked figure appeared at the front door on the doorbell camera. That is not a conclusion the Pima County Sheriff's Department has confirmed publicly. It is a theory that emerged from a structural fact about the property, a gate that, by its design, should not have opened from the outside without a code or a key or someone on the inside who opened it. Hold that. The entire Guthrie family has been formally cleared. Every sibling, every spouse. The sheriff made that explicit in a February statement, and he has not walked it back. So the question the gate raises is not about family. It is about access. Who else had legitimate reason to enter that property in the weeks before February 1? Who would Nancy have trusted enough to let in without a second thought? The FBI has been asking those questions since March. Investigators returned to the Catalina Foothills neighborhood and specifically requested the names and contact information for contractors, landscapers, and construction workers who were active in the area in the days and weeks leading up to the disappearance. NewsNation correspondent Brian Enton reported that agents also focused on a property nearby that was vacated shortly before Nancy disappeared. A retired SWAT commander told Parade magazine that this vacant property could have functioned as a staging location for whoever was responsible. That account comes from a single source and has not been officially confirmed. But the FBI's documented interest in both the vacant property and the contractors working in the area gives it weight that a single speculation alone would not carry. The physical evidence recovered from the scene is still being processed. Investigators confirmed that drops of Nancy's blood were found on the front porch. DNA from an unknown male profile was recovered from inside the home. That sample has been described as a mixed profile, meaning it may contain genetic material from more than one person, and the results are still pending. The FBI has turned to forensic genetic genealogy to try to work through it. This is the same technique that ultimately identified Brian Kohberger as the suspect in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students in 2022, after conventional DNA analysis had stalled. It is not a fast process. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Lance Leising told CBS News, "It takes a while." He did not offer a timeline. Neither has anyone else. 16 gloves were collected from the area surrounding the home during the early phase of the investigation. Most were ruled out. One appeared to match, in a general way, the gloves worn by the figure in the doorbell camera footage. That glove was sent to a lab and entered into the FBI's national DNA database. The result came back as a match to a local restaurant worker. The Pima County Sheriff's Department stated clearly that this individual is not considered part of the investigation. The glove was a dead end. Not every piece of physical evidence leads somewhere, but the process of elimination is itself evidence of how thoroughly investigators have been working the scene. There is also a vehicle, a ring camera belonging to a neighbor approximately 2.5 miles from. Nancy's home captured a car moving south at 2:36 a.m. On February 1, roughly 8 minutes after the pacemaker app lost its connection to her phone at 2:28 a.m. Sheriff Nanos acknowledged the footage when asked about it in a Today Show interview. He confirmed investigators are aware of it and are looking into it. He said they have not yet been able to determine whether the vehicle is connected to the case. The timing is notable. The distance from the home is consistent with a vehicle leaving the area after the window in which investigators believe the abduction occurred. Whether that vehicle belongs to the person responsible, to someone else entirely, or to a coincidence that the neighborhood at 2:36 inches the morning happened to produce that question has not been answered publicly. What the FBI has said is that they are still working through footage, more than 10,000 hours of it, collected from cameras across the greater Tucson area. Ring doorbells, business security systems, traffic cameras, private residences. 10,000 hours is not a number that suggests investigators are running out of material. It is a number that suggests the answer may already exist somewhere in what they have. Additional camera images were recovered from security equipment mounted at other points on Nancy's own property, covering the backyard, the pool area, the driveway, and garage. CBS News reported that law enforcement sources confirmed these images captured family members, landscapers, and pool workers in the weeks before the disappearance. Nothing in those images appeared suspicious. The FBI has no plans to release them publicly. That is the physical record as it stands. Confirmed blood, pending DNA, a glove that went nowhere, a vehicle 8 minutes after the pacemaker dropped, footage from inside the property that showed nothing unusual in the weeks before, and a security gate that investigators have reportedly found difficult to reconcile with a single person acting alone from the outside. Now add the ransom notes, because the notes are where the confirmed facts begin, pulling in directions that do not align neatly with each other. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, multiple media outlets received written communications claiming to be from whoever was holding her. KOLD-TV, a CBS affiliate in Tucson, received a letter and reported it to investigators. CBS News confirmed that investigators reviewed it, took it seriously, and shared it with the FBI. The note reportedly contained specific details about Nancy's home and what she was wearing the night she disappeared. Investigators asked that its contents not be publicly disclosed. TMZ later reported receiving a second communication described as highly sophisticated, involving a cryptocurrency demand in the range of $6 million. The FBI was notified. Multiple ransom notes, specific details, cryptocurrency demands, deadlines. 2 deadlines passed without any publicly confirmed exchange. The family released a video on February 7 saying they were ready to pay, that they had received a message and wanted to talk, that they needed proof of life before they could move forward. Savannah Guthrie's brother Cameron said directly to camera that the family had not heard anything directly from whoever was holding their mother. He asked them to reach out. No proof of life has been confirmed. not through any official channel, not through any family statement. The FBI has not confirmed the authenticity of any of the notes. The Pima County Sheriff and the FBI have not publicly identified whether any of the communications represent genuine contact from someone holding Nancy, or whether they were sent by individuals with no connection to the crime at all. That ambiguity is not unusual in high-profile abduction cases. When a case receives national media coverage, communications claiming connection to it can come from people who have no involvement whatsoever. Investigators must treat each one seriously, while simultaneously verifying whether it has any basis in fact. But former FBI Special Agent Harry Trombitis told Yahoo News that the ransom scenario is appearing less and less likely to reflect the actual motive. His reasoning: the logistics of a ransom abduction require ongoing communication between the perpetrator and the family. Without that communication, the mechanism does not function, and the family has said, publicly and repeatedly, that they have had no direct contact. Sheriff Nanos has offered the only public statement that comes close to addressing motive. He told NBC News in March that investigators believe they know why the abduction happened. He said those beliefs have not diminished since the first days of the investigation. He did not specify the theory. He specifically said he would not, because disclosing it would compromise the integrity of what investigators are building. That silence is not absence of information, it is the deliberate containment of it. And then there are the cadaver dogs. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed in March that cadaver dogs are no longer being actively deployed in the search. Nanos told Fox News Digital they remain available if needed. A former K-9 officer who spoke to Fox News said the decision defies logic, given the circumstances and the evidence of blood at the scene. The department did not elaborate on the reasoning. That decision can be read in two directions. Either investigators are operating under the belief that Nancy is alive and a cadaver search is premature, or there is something about the current state of the investigation that makes active cadaver deployment unnecessary in ways that have not been explained. Both interpretations carry weight. Neither has been confirmed. What sits at the center of all of it is a motive that investigators say they understand, a method that suggests planning well beyond a single night, and a security gate that raises a question no one in official law enforcement has answered on the record. How did whoever took Nancy Guthrie get inside? The answer to that question connects to the weekend visits, to the contractors in the neighborhood, to the vacant property nearby, and to whatever the FBI found on January 11 that they have not yet disclosed. Those four threads do not exist separately. They are describing the same preparation, from different angles, converging on the same window of time. If you are watching this from Tucson, if you hired someone to work on your property in January, if you saw a vehicle you did not recognize parked in the area on a weekend evening, the FBI tip line is in the description. The family has said plainly that someone in this community has information they do not realize is significant. They are right, because preparation at this level does not happen invisibly. Someone saw something, they may not have known what they were seeing at the time. The $1.2 million reward is still available, and the case is still open. Take the security gate. Take the weekend pattern. Take January 11. Put them in the same room and ask a single question. What do they have in common? They all require advanced knowledge of the property, not general knowledge, specific knowledge, the kind that comes from being there, from watching, from understanding that a particular gate does not open from the outside, which means entry requires either a code, a key, or a person inside who is willing to open it. The kind of knowledge you do not acquire by driving past once. Sheriff Nanos has said on the record that he believes Nancy was targeted. That word carries legal and investigative weight that gets lost when it becomes part of routine coverage. Targeted does not mean she was chosen at random and the crime was planned. It means the planning preceded the choice. It means whoever is responsible identified Nancy Guthrie specifically, assessed her home specifically, and built a method of approach around what they had learned about her specifically. That is a different category of crime than a burglary that escalated. Weaver Barkman, a crime scene analyst who spent 26 years with the Pima County Sheriff's Department, told the Arizona Daily Star early in the investigation that the forensic preparation visible in the doorbell footage, the mask, the gloves, the deliberate approach pointed to someone who understood evidence, someone who had thought about DNA, about fingerprints, about trace material. He initially framed this as consistent with a planned burglary rather than a planned abduction. but a planned burglary executed by someone who understood forensics well enough to dress accordingly, who neutralized the camera, who appeared at the property on at least one prior occasion. That level of preparation describes a person operating with significant information about the target. And information has a source. The FBI has been asking about contractors and workers in the neighborhood. They have been asking about a vacant property that was emptied shortly before Nancy disappeared. They have been asking residents to review footage from January 11 and January 24. Retired Pima County homicide detective Kurt Dabb told Parade magazine that based on the evidence and the execution of the crime, he believes 2 to 4 people may have been involved in coordinating what happened. That account comes from a single source, but the coordination it describes transportation, logistics, a method of entry into a secured property, the removal of an 84-year-old woman in the middle of the night without any witness coming forward does not describe a solo operation accomplished without preparation. Here is where the threads connect. A person conducting reconnaissance on weekend nights would need somewhere to go between visits. A vacant property nearby, emptied in the weeks before the abduction, is the kind of location that could serve a staging function without drawing attention. Construction activity in a neighborhood normalizes the presence of unfamiliar vehicles and unfamiliar people. Workers with legitimate access to the area would have reason to be near properties, to observe schedules, to note the presence or absence of vehicles, to learn which homes have older residents living alone. None of this is a conclusion. Every investigative thread here is either alleged, a working theory from named experts, or a confirmed investigative focus without a confirmed result. The FBI has not named a suspect. The sheriff has not named a suspect. This video will not name one either. What this video is saying is that when you place the confirmed facts beside each other, the weekend pattern, the gate, the vacant property, the contractor inquiries, the January 11 focus, the DNA still being processed, they describe a single, coherent picture. Not of a random crime, of a planned one, planned by someone who moved carefully, moved on weekends, and left enough of a trace that 53 days later, the FBI is still in that neighborhood asking questions. And then there is the warning that Sheriff Nanos issued in March. He did not bury it. He said it directly in his NBC interview. He said that while he believes the abduction was targeted, that Nancy was chosen for a specific reason, he cannot rule out the possibility that the person responsible could strike again. His exact framing was the word absolutely. He believes the crime was targeted. He also believes the suspect could absolutely act again. That is not a rhetorical warning. That is a sitting sheriff, leading an active federal investigation, telling the public that an unidentified individual who successfully abducted a woman from her home has not been caught and has not been deterred. If you have an elderly parent living alone, if you have a neighbor who is older and lives without family nearby, if you are in a residential neighborhood in southern Arizona and you have footage from January or early February that you have not reviewed, this case is the reason to review it now. The FBI tip line is in the description. The family has said someone in this community has information they do not realize is significant. The sheriff has said the suspect could act again. Those two statements together are not background noise. They are a direct address to anyone watching this. There is a detail that has been sitting in public view since early in this investigation that has not received the attention it deserves. In 2013, the Today Show filmed a segment inside Nancy Guthrie's home. The segment included footage of her bedroom. It aired on national television. It remains accessible. The layout of the interior of her home, the location of specific rooms, the general structure of the property. These were visible to anyone who watched that segment and retained what they saw. Law enforcement has not publicly commented on whether this footage is relevant to the investigation. But the question of how whoever took Nancy acquired detailed knowledge of her home enough to plan entry, enough to know the camera placement, enough to know her schedule remains one that no official has answered on the record. The FBI has been working through 10,000 hours of video. They have been processing DNA through forensic genetic genealogy. They have been returning to the neighborhood in March to ask questions they did not get satisfactory answers to in February. Former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Lance Leising told CBS News that at 45 days, an investigation like this becomes much harder, that fighting for new leads requires active effort. But he also said the silence from investigators could mean they are onto something, that he would like to be hopeful. Nanos told KOLD as recently as March 23 that he has good evidence in front of him, that he is not giving up, that the investigation is active across multiple fronts simultaneously. What he has not said is when. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 53 days. Her pacemaker lost its signal at 2:28 inches the morning on February 1. She has not been seen since. She requires medication daily to stay alive. Her daughter said publicly, 24 days into the search, that Nancy may already be gone, and then said the family is still blowing on the embers of hope. That is not a phrase constructed for media. That is what it sounds like when a family is living inside a disappearance that has no resolution and no endpoint they can see. The investigation is the most active it has been, in terms of personnel. The FBI team at Quantico has been involved in reviewing video evidence. Federal prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Phoenix have been working alongside agents in Tucson. U.S. Attorney Timothy Corchain said publicly that his office will go anywhere, do anything, and persevere always to find her. Sheriff Nanos is facing a recall effort driven in part by public pressure over the handling of the case. He has not stepped back from it. As of today, no suspect has been publicly identified. No arrest has been made. No proof of life has been confirmed by law enforcement or by the family through any verified channel. The ransom note deadlines have passed without any publicly confirmed resolution. The DNA results from inside the home are still pending. The forensic genealogy process is still underway. The FBI has continued to collect and review surveillance footage from across the region. The family's most recent statement, released March 21, asked the Tucson community for renewed attention. They said they cannot grieve. They said they can only ache and wonder. They said their focus is solely on finding Nancy and bringing her home. Someone in this community has information they do not realize is significant. That is not a phrase the family chose carelessly. It reflects what investigators have told them, that the answer to this case may already exist in a piece of footage, a memory, a detail from a Saturday night in January that did not seem worth noting at the time. Two questions remain without any public answer. The first is motive. The sheriff says investigators believe they know why the abduction happened. He has held that position since the first days of the case. He will not say what the theory is. That means the motive is either something investigators are protecting because naming it would alert the suspect, or something so specific to Nancy's circumstances that confirming it publicly would compromise the investigation in ways that cannot be reversed. Either explanation describes a case with a theory that is more developed than the public record suggests. The second is access. How did whoever took Nancy get through a gate that is nearly impossible to breach from the outside, into a home where her phone and belongings remained behind, leaving blood on the porch, but no confirmed sign of forced entry at the gate itself? That question connects every other thread in this case, and it has not been answered. Somewhere between the weekend of January 11 and the early morning hours of February 1, a sequence of decisions was made by at least one person that led to Nancy Guthrie being taken from her home. The FBI believes they are closer to identifying who made those decisions. They have not said how close. They have not said when. Nancy has been gone for 53 days. The FBI is still here. And the person who knows what happened has not come forward. This case has already changed how law enforcement in southern Arizona talks about elderly residents living alone. Here is what it should change for everyone else. The doorbell camera at Nancy's front door was neutralized in under 2 minutes. The camera disconnected at 1:47 a.m. Branches were placed in front of the lens. Motion was detected at 2:12 a.m. That is a 2-5-minute gap between camera down and confirmed activity at the property. If a single camera at the front door is the only recording device covering a home, that gap is enough time for someone who has already mapped the property to move through it without producing a single recoverable image. The practical implication is direct. A doorbell camera is a visible deterrent. It is not a complete security system. Investigators recovered additional camera footage from equipment covering Nancy's backyard, pool area, and driveway cameras that were not visible from the front approach. Those images captured nothing suspicious in the weeks before the abduction, but they existed. And in a different version of events, a camera positioned at an angle the suspect did not anticipate could be the image that closes this case. If someone you know lives alone and relies on a single front-facing camera, that conversation is worth having now. Nancy's pacemaker was connected to an app on her phone. When that connection dropped at 2:28 a.m., it created a timestamp. That timestamp became one of the most precise pieces of confirmed evidence in the entire investigation. narrowing the window in which investigators believe she was taken to a specific 4-1-minute span. Medical devices that sync to phones are not typically thought of as security tools. In this case, that sync produced the clearest timeline marker law enforcement has. For anyone whose family member wears a connected medical device, understanding how that data is stored and who can access it in an emergency is not an abstract concern. Routine is visible from the outside in ways that feel invisible from the inside. Nancy attended a Sunday church livestream with enough consistency that her absence triggered a welfare check. She traveled by Uber on weekend afternoons in a pattern that was recoverable through digital records. She had family dinners that followed a recognizable schedule. None of those things are mistakes. They are the texture of a normal life. But this case demonstrates, through confirmed investigative focus on 3 consecutive weekends of alleged surveillance, that a visible routine is information. And information, in the wrong hands, becomes a plan. What this case teaches us about targeted abduction is that the most dangerous phase of the crime happens before any crime is officially committed. Dark Truth documentary covers not just what happened, but how, and what it reveals about the systems and patterns that surround all of us. Nancy's case is not a cautionary tale about one family in one neighborhood. It is a documented account of how preparation precedes harm in ways that communities rarely see until it is too late. And for the Guthrie family, this is still day 53. We started this video with one question. What routine did Nancy break in the week before she disappeared, and did someone notice before she did? 53 days later, that question does not have a confirmed public answer. What we have are 3 weekend dates that investigators believe are connected. A security gate that raises questions about access no official has yet answered on the record, a motive the sheriff says he understands but will not name, and DNA evidence still moving through a laboratory somewhere. Dark Truth documentary will follow every development in this case as it happens. Every lab result, every named suspect, every arrest. If this case breaks overnight, we will have it when you wake up. Subscribe, not because we asked you to, but because Nancy's family is still waiting. And when there is news, you should hear it here first. The FBI tip line is in the description. 1-800-CALL-FBI. If you are in Tucson, if you were in that neighborhood in January, if you have footage you have not reviewed, please look. The family has said someone in this community has the answer, without knowing they have it. Whoever took Nancy Guthrie chose her specifically, which means they knew something about her that the people who loved her did not know anyone else was watching. What was it? She's been gone for 53 days. The FBI is still here, and the person who knows what happened has not come forward.